were death camps. And so it started on the 22nd of July 1942. So Lena's mother was taken at that time. And look, because they had to leave their jobs and they were starving, Jewish people were told if they worked in the ghetto, they would get rations. They got one bowl of soup a day with, if they were lucky, there was a bit of potato, a piece of potato in it, and they got a very small amount of bread. How they didn't die from starvation, I don't know. Some did. Lena's family didn't. So to get that bowl of soup, they worked in the laundry. And when Lena's mother was taken, the only reason she was saved is that she hid under the German uniforms that she was helping to wash. Okay, and before I go on with that, but that's fine, stay there. There was an old man whose family was working in the laundry, and they were taken, and he was too old to work. So even though they were starvation rations, Lena's father said, we have to share with the old man. So their meagre 2 rations they divided into 3 to help the old man. That would have been a big decision for Lena's father, because he risked having his daughter Lena die from starvation, but he couldn't see the old man die of starvation. And so we go on. So besides the millions of Jews killed in concentration camps, there were also tens of thousands of captured soldiers, political prisoners, gypsies, homosexuals, Poles, other Slavic people, Catholic priests, pastors and disabled. 1.9 million Polish people alone were killed. Not just in concentration camps, but in fighting, because the Polish people took up arms against the Germans. Okay, there were partisans in the bush. Some of those were Jewish, where they could. 11 million victims, 6 million Jews, 1.5 million of those Jews were children. Now, those statistics are really quite horrific. And I know a lot of Jewish people in Sydney and Melbourne, not so much Cairns, but so many of them have stories of being children of survivors. The actual survivors of the Holocaust now are dying out, but the children of survivors, they still carry a lot of that intergenerational trauma. And so in my next book, I'm going to actually be doing one on children of survivors. Okay, so that's on the way. So, and I think, with regard to the Polish people, there's been, as I said, a lot of controversy over this, and I'm going to run out of time. There's a lot of controversy over it. There were a lot of Polish people who helped Jews. And so in Yad Vashem, in Jerusalem, the Holocaust memorial there are more Polish people who are righteous among the nations than any other national group. There were also collaborators as well, who were only too happy to get their hands on Jewish homes or wealth and dob in their Jewish neighbours. There were also, of course, bystanders that stayed quiet and didn't do anything. But it's amazing, with Poland, it is the only nation in Europe where Hitler had a decree that any Polish family that helped Jews would be shot along with all of their children. The only nation. So he really hated Poles as well. So it was actually very dangerous, but despite the danger, many helped. So this is one of the bunkers. So Zob and JFZW, Jewish Fighting Organisations, there was resistance. We're going to have to move on. I'm just going to have to go on. Lena collected light bulbs from the flats that were empty because of the deportation, so they could use for Molotov cocktails. She used some of the uniforms she gave to the resistance so they could surprise the Germans when they didn't know who was on their side and who wasn't. But Lena herself managed to, and that's one of the bunkers, so we'll go on to the next one. Lena herself managed to leave the ghetto one day before the uprising. And that's because she decided, I'm not going to work in the laundry anymore for the German war machine. I'm not going to get deported. I'll just go to the gates and they can just shoot me now. And when she went to the gates, the two Germans knew what was going to be happening and they decided to let her through. The only thing is she had nowhere to go. And so she went back to where she was staying, and there was a note under the door somehow smuggled in. The old man had passed away, but his family knew what they had done to keep him alive, and they said, we have a hiding place in a bathroom for you. If you can get here, come. So she had somewhere to go. But she had her brother Salik there, and she said, oh, I can't leave Salik, because her mother and father and brother had been killed. Her sister Fella was missing, and Salik was the only one left she knew of. And she went to him and she said, look, this is a situation, I can't go. He said, you must go. Somebody has to live to tell the story. And so with that she went, and that's always been ringing in her ears. If I survive, I've got to tell a story. And I'm really probably going to have to maybe leave it at that. Let's just go quickly through these. You can see what happened in the ghetto with the uprising, what happened with the Germans. Just keep going through. That's Treblinka, the stones. It's like a memorial, recreating the burial pits. Next one. You can go on, yeah. So look, I'll just talk to this one quickly. So Lena was in a bathroom for 18 months with this family. Then when the Poles rose up again against the Nazis, the caretaker kicked them out. They're out on the streets. Fortunately, they found someone who told them he'd build a bunker under the city of Warsaw. So there's a recreation of the bunker in the sewers under Warsaw for another 6 months. Lena survived, and you can see they couldn't stand up. They had hardly anything to eat except some barley that they managed to scavenge, and they roasted it for coffee, and they made soup, and they made rissoles out of this barley, and somehow survived. They couldn't wash because they couldn't foul the water. They had the same clothes on for the whole 6 months. They had lice. Amongst all of that, you can imagine there was a lot of tension. And so Lena wrote a diary, but she also wrote something called Bunker Weekly to try and put some funny jokes in there to keep them laughing and not arguing and surviving. So she's that kind of person. And here we have, on the left we have Attic, and down here, I'll just point to here, this person here, I can't see it, I'll have to go over there. This person here is Lena, and that's a raft. And basically once a week they had to take the waste from their toilet as far away as they could from where the little bunker where they were. And so next one. Lena on her, so look, you know, when I really should say, when finally they were allowed to come out and the war had ended, she couldn't believe it, but when she came out was the first time she had cried in all those years. She'd held it in all of that time, and the reason she cried is she had nowhere to go, no one to go to, and no one who cared if she was alive. But she had to rebuild her life, which she did. And she eventually married and had children and came to Australia in 1949. And that's her on her 100th birthday party with a certificate from the Sydney Jewish Museum. She also had a letter from the Queen. So next one. And so I'll just say, we spent the Mother's Day weekend with Lena in Sydney recently, and she's such a gracious, wonderful person. It was just really good to see her. She'd been waiting for us to come, and glad we were able to do that, because I was speaking at the Great Synagogue on Mother's Day evening on a biblical figure called Ruth. There were other women speakers as well. So we were able to go down there. It was a Nations Bless Israel event. So this is my memoir, and I was a finalist in the Queensland Literary Awards for that last year. And it tells the story of how I helped the Mapoon Aboriginal people north of Weipa return to their land in 1974. They had been moved off in 1963 for mining, which never ended up occurring anyway. And so while working on that, helping them to go home, I found my home as part of an Aboriginal family. Okay, next one. So the William Cooper book, that was my first solo book, and basically William Cooper was an Aboriginal person and also a Christian, and he led the Australian Aborigines League in 1938 to a protest to the German consulate in Melbourne because of Kristallnacht, the start of the Holocaust. Because he did that, he has been honoured by the Jewish community in Australia and also at Yad Vashem. And at the book launch, I was able to organise for the German consul to receive the letter from William Cooper's grandson that the Germans wouldn't receive back in 1938. And an absolute bonus to that was that he gave an apology. And there were Holocaust survivors and children of survivors there who were really moved by that. That's the launch there. Another book, Yarrabah, Dying Days of Segregation. Really, this history is unknown. It's not really taught in our schools, or and I think that's something that libraries and schools and universities could really use these as resources. But it's basically mainly focused on Queensland history and talks about aspirations for self-determination, land rights, human rights, etc. And very much you get the people's point of view. So I quote a lot of what the people themselves were saying. So next one, and this is my second last slide. So people tend to think that Captain Cook discovered Australia. Well, no, that's not the case. Certainly he travelled down the east coast of Australia and mapped it. But 164 years before that, there was someone called Jan Soon, a Dutchman, and basically it was at Mapoon that the first landing was made. So I talk about the Spanish, the Dutch, also the English and the French. So if you want the real history of explorers coming to Australia, searching for this great Southland, that's it. Okay, so last one now, just to let you know that, look, these are great resources for NAIDOC Week, which is in July. William Cooper's called the father of NAIDOC because he actually started it back in the 1930s. And also we have Reconciliation Week, which is next week from the 27th of May right through to the 3rd of June. And if you want to come to Munganbana's gallery opening in 33 Lake Street for Reconciliation Week, it's on at 5:30 next Monday. Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions.